Republican Senator Tim Scott is a funny guy. He's trying to help. He sucked up to Trump. He even found himself a fiance when it seemed like maybe being a single guy would hurt his chances of being selected as Donald Trump's VP. He will defend absolutely anything Trump says or does. He's really doing what he can to help Trump as he sees it. But he appeared on CNBC this week and gave an interview that seems to me like the interview you would give if you're trying to destroy Donald Trump's candidacy. Now, the people we're going to be hearing from here, one of the interviewers is Andrew Ross Sorkin. I like Andrew Ross Sorkin. I think he's a good interviewer, especially in these situations. We're also going to hear from Joe Kernan. Now, Joe Kernan I can do without. He's a right winger. I once got into an argument with him on Twitter. But to his credit, Joe Kernan is also asking at least some real questions about the futility, in a sense, of Donald Trump's tariffs. And what this interview exposes is that when you take a few minutes even, right, like 30 seconds won't do it, but 4 minutes will. If you take 4 minutes to really dig down into Trump's tariff ideas a little bit, you see how quickly they implode. So let's listen to this, and I'll kind of prep you. Initially, Tim Scott kind of backs away from the tariffs by saying a lot of what Trump says is just abstract. He's not literally saying he'll put a tariff on John Deere, even though Trump said, I will put a tariff on John Deere of 200%. He's speaking abstractly, which leads to the question, well, then when can you believe him? And Tim Scott says, well, believe his actions. And that goes south quick. So let's examine this. This is very, very interesting.
People working paycheck to paycheck.
Are you a free trader, Senator? Do you
Absolutely.
Agree, you agree with all the tariffs? Do you think John Deere 200%?
Listen,
do you think companies that make stuff here should be a 15% tax? That's industrial policy, isn't it?
I believe that President Trump oftentimes talks in the abstract.
Okay, so first defense is it doesn't matter whether I agree with what Trump says because it's not what he's really going to do. He's speaking abstractly. That's statement number one.
Number one. Number two, I do believe that we have the final.
So what are we supposed to believe then?
Well, listen, let's believe his performance. Believe what we saw for 2017 to 2020. Well, let me finish because you asked a good question. What should we believe? We should believe that a 28%, reducing the taxes from 35 to 21%, repatriated almost $2 trillion from around the world, bringing it home. We should believe the 7 million jobs that he created, and 2/3 of those jobs went to African Americans, Hispanics.
Okay, so second part is it doesn't matter what he says because it's abstract. Believe his accomplishments, which are good. That runs into a problem, though.
We should actually believe in what he produced. Yes,
that excludes,
100%.
obviously, that excludes COVID, right? Part of what you're saying is we should sort of take this timeout period around COVID and not include that in...
That's not what I'm saying at all. I would actually say that if you look at COVID itself specifically, they said that you couldn't get a vaccine in 10 years or 5 years. He did it in 9 months.
So now we're on part three, which is doesn't matter what Trump says because it's abstract, but his performance is awesome. Well, but the performance wasn't awesome during COVID, right? Well, he got a vaccine done really quickly. The problem is that most of Trump's followers hate the vaccine. So now Tim Scott's defense of Trump is something that MAGA doesn't want to hear a word about because they hate that damn vaccine.
The reason I'm raising this is because when we try to do an apples to apples between the Trump administration and the Biden administration, invariably what we hear is look at all of the economic growth during the Trump administration. But by the way, please don't look at the last year and then look at how terrible we say that the Biden administration did on a relative basis. But by the way, please don't even contemplate the idea that anything happened before that as it relates to COVID, right?
Let us ask the American people, are they better off now than they were 4 years ago? The answer is emphatically no. Why? Because when the average family
we were writing them
is
checks with Donald Trump's name on them.
$1,000, $1,075 and lost spending power, of course you're not better off. When gas is up 50% more than the last month.
And why do you think that was?
Well, obviously there's two reasons. Number one, the reasons why the average American family has less spending power today than they did beforehand was because the first vote the Democrats took in January 2021 was can I finish my comment? Thanks so much. $1.9 trillion of additional spending from the federal government
after that already coming out of it.
An accelerated.
You guys following this? If you're realizing how convoluted consider where we started. do you defend Trump's plan for tariffs? And the first thing Tim Scott does is say, you can't even really evaluate it because Trump doesn't mean it. He's speaking abstractly. It gets us to judge Trump by his performance. Well, the performance, you want to exclude COVID from his performance, right? No, he got the vaccine done quickly. MAGA hates that. They don't want the vaccine. And now we're just going back and forth about everything I can convince you has ever been good is thanks to Republicans. And everything that I can convince you has been bad is thanks to Democrats, no matter who was in office. Let's listen to just a few more seconds. I think you're kind of getting how there is nothing here. They want to have it all three ways on everything. And Tim Scott is one of the most shameless Republicans when it comes to this.
Inflation hits 9% in June, July of 2021, leading to the crushing effect of high inflation that we haven't seen since the Jimmy Carter years on the average person working paycheck to paycheck.
That's easy to explain that we saw around the globe as it relates to inflation. If you're going to put all of it on that bill,
so do you disagree with that? Well, here's how you do it. You go from the $1.9 trillion to an infrastructure bill that was $1.2 trillion, and then an Inflation Reduction Act that was another $800 billion.
All right, so now he's just talking about how Democrats spent so much money, so there was inflation. And of course, what Andrew Ross Sorkin is trying to bring up is we had a natural experiment on inflation, which is it was lowest among the Western developed countries in the U.S., and it came down the most quickly among Western developed countries in the U.S. under Biden. How can you say the job Biden did was so bad on inflation when we had the best inflation decline and lowest level of inflation compared to equivalent countries around the world? And he just talks about this spending bill or that spending bill. But the original question was, do you support tariffs, Senator? And by the way, he hasn't answered it, although I think he kind of has, which is he said, I support free trade. And I'm not actually going to address Trump's plan because I don't believe that Trump's actually going to do it because he's just speaking in the abstract. There's nothing here. We just spent 7.5 minutes after looking at 2.5 minutes of this video during which there is nothing of substance. There's no discussion of, listen, there are times when tariffs are a useful economic tool. I've outlined the tariffs that before. I outlined it last week, depending on whether there are substitute goods, depending on supply chains, depending on all these different things. There are times when you can use a targeted tariff as a tool to achieve some kind of economic benefit for your country. And the way Trump is going to do it would be a disaster. There's no discussion of that because Tim Scott is jumping from one thing to another, having it both ways on every issue. And if I didn't know any better, I'd say Tim Scott is actually trying to hurt Donald Trump. I know that's not the case. He's just so bad at this that that's what he ultimately ends up doing. Hey, this is really funny. Some of you may have noticed that Melania Trump has been on an interview tour lately because of this memoir that she wrote. She has videos she's putting out and she's being interviewed. CNN has now announced that when they tried to schedule an interview with her to talk about the book, they asked CNN for $250,000. She wanted to be paid $250,000 to be interviewed. Now, apparently, the book publisher is saying it was a misunderstanding. So the article reads, nearly 2 months ago, CNN reached out to Melania's publisher to ask for an interview. After several exchanges, the publisher sent an unusual demand last week. An interview would cost $250,000. In an email to CNN, Skyhorse Publishing sent a document labeled Confidentiality and Non-Disclosure Agreement, laying out the terms, and it included a licensing fee of $250,000. CNN didn't sign it. Days later, after a separate CNN journalist asked about the fee, the publisher said it was a mistake, saying, quote, neither Melania nor anyone from her team knew anything about the NDA, and the document that was sent reflected an internal miscommunication. Had CNN signed it, the normal course of business, we would have approached Melania's team to talk about specifics. Paying a public figure for an interview, especially the spouse of a political candidate, is highly frowned upon. You know, let me see how I want to say this. In the past, we've dealt with Skyhorse Publishing, and in the past, sometimes we've been asked for money for interviews. Now, listen carefully. I'm not saying Skyhorse asked us for money. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that we've had publishers ask us for money, and we've dealt with Skyhorse before. Two separate statements. Whether they overlap or not, I'm not saying right now. It is absolutely outrageous. It is absolutely outrageous. And it raises questions as to whether Melania was paid for this softball interview that she did with Sean Hannity.
Wow, you were expecting it all.
I did, because I saw how they treat him, how the media was against him. I think they are afraid of his strength. And he was leading this country with peace through strength.
We know that they don't even live together. She's missing from the campaign trail. This is all a farce. This is theater, as some would call it. But now we have an additional question, which is, was Melania Trump paid for this softball interview? Or what about when she was interviewed in an even more softball interview with Fox News' Ainsley Earhardt talking about how great Trump is? Did she get money for this one?
How do you feel when people say they don't like him? What do you wish they knew about him?
That he is really a family man. He loves his family.
What?
He loves this country.
He once said that his son is doing a good job, Barron, and was able to express barely a positive attitude towards him. He seems sometimes completely indifferent to what's going on with his kids. He has no relationship with his wife. What are you talking about? So, of course, now after CNN was asked for $250,000 for an interview with Melania, we are left to wonder, did she get paid for these interviews? What we know for sure is that all of the positive feelings she claims to have for Trump in these interviews seem completely undercut by what's actually happening in their relationship. Hey, you've got to see this. Trump supporters are now fighting each other at his rallies. This is really whacked stuff. They can't even get along with each other. This is from Trump's pre-rally line in Saginaw, Michigan. And if you want to talk about the opposite of classy behavior, if you want to talk about the opposite of everything that people like me advocate for, which you can't get a Trump rally itself is the furthest thing from everything I advocate for in this world. Trump supporters fighting each other is like the cherry on top. Check this out. All right, so it's just fists flying. It's complete and total bedlam at this thing. And there are now reports from Up North Live, fight at SVSU as people wait in line for Trump's visit captured on video. A fight broke out at Saginaw Valley State University as people waited in line for Trump. The fight was captured on video by Anna Liz Nichols of Michigan Advance. Now, it's early in the reporting on this. I am going to acknowledge to you that even though it's being reported on as these are all Trump supporters fighting with each other, it's certainly possible that there are non-Trump supporters here, but that doesn't really make the story any better, because the story is either Trump supporters are fighting with each other or Trump supporters are fighting with people who don't like Trump and turning to violence over political differences. So either way, this is despicable and degeneracy. But it's really important to understand that we can't just write this off and say it's isolated individuals just engaging in behavior completely unrelated to that their candidate is espousing. Trump has created this environment where violence is okay, beating people up is okay. He talks about treating people roughly, let police have a day to treat people as roughly as they want, treat this protester roughly, whatever the case may be. We are now 9, closing in on 10 years in to Trump fostering an environment that not only tolerates, but celebrates and invites in behavior like this in all sorts of different ways. So we'll get the details probably by Monday as to exactly what happened here. But people getting into a physical altercation at a Trump rally is one of the least surprising headlines you could give me. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel as we approach 3 million subscribers. We will take a break, and I have quite the program for you today. If you value what we do at The David Pakman Show, remember to support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/David Pakman Show, where you can get access to behind-the-scenes videos, the daily bonus show, the commercial-free daily show. You can support the show for as little as $2 a month. Check it out at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. The David Pakman Show, of course, does depend directly on you. It's not some corporate media entity with 10 layers of editors and producers, as delightful as that sounds. No, not really. It is not some big corporation or some rich guy or gal founder that funds this show. It's really just people who watch it and they say, hey, I think this is worthy of my support. It's not expensive. We are primarily funded by people who pay $3 or $4 a month using a coupon code like Save Democracy 24. As I've said before, if you have a cable subscription, you are paying $3 a month to Fox News, whether you like it or not, whether you know it or not. So consider signing up at joinpakman.com. Use the coupon code if you like, and we do everything we can to put together some good extras for you, including the daily bonus show, commercial-free audio and video streams of the show, and much, much more. If you want to talk about turning down the temperature, not inciting people to violence, showing that political discourse can be sober and respectful, you do not go out and say, Kamala's murdering people. And that's exactly what Donald Trump did this week in Waunakee, Wisconsin. You know, they say that when you question whether Trump respects democracy, you're inciting violence against him. You shouldn't say that, even if it's true. And then here comes Trump and says Kamala Harris is murdering people. She is responsible. Listen to what he had to say, and then we'll dig into the kind of bigger picture of this incitement narrative that's been generated.
By the way, I'm outraged that she let in the savage who raped and murdered Rachel Morin. Kamala let her in. She murdered him. In my opinion, Kamala murdered him, just like she did, just like she had a gun in her hand.
They love to say Democrats need to tone down the violent rhetoric. Democrats saying Trump's no good are responsible for two different people wanting to shoot Trump, even if those individuals seem to be right-wingers who don't care what the left says. When I say, citing evidence, I don't think Trump cares about institutions or democracy. Trump seems fine being president, even if he lost the election. He doesn't respect what this country was built on. The Magats and the Magapotamians and the Magadonians write to me and say, David, those comments are the reason why people are targeting Trump and why there's death threats and assassination attempts. And then Trump says Kamala is murdering people, and yet you insist it's the left that needs to tone down the rhetoric. It's not logical, but it's never about logic. And this is, of course, disgusting rhetoric that will weaponize people against Kamala Harris, who now requires even more extensive, even more jumpy, by the way, from some of the videos I've seen, Secret Service protection. And it is another instance of projection where they accuse the left of that which they do themselves. And in this case, it's inciting violence and using violent rhetoric against their political enemies who happen to be on the left, not the right. Donald Trump at this same event in Waunakee, Wisconsin, generally struggling, at one point just spitting out random words. I recognize the words he's using in this clip as being words from the English language. The order he's putting them in, the syntax, not really something that takes me back to my days in college English. Let me put it that way.
And again, we have more of it. We don't even use it. We don't even go for it. They don't let us take it out environmentally, you know, they spend all their time and energy on the Green New Scam. Do you ever know, though, they don't talk about that anymore. When was the last time you heard about the Green New Scam? They don't talk about it. You know why? Because it doesn't work. They wanted $93 trillion, the ultimate plan, was $93 trillion. They wanted to rip down all the buildings in Manhattan, those gorgeous buildings with those big, beautiful windows, and they wanted to rebuild them without windows, because without windows is more energy efficient. Tell somebody you're going to take 40,000 feet of office space, but you have no windows. This is what they want. These people are crazy. They're crazy. Take a look at some of them are actually, you got to see the bathrooms that they project for people.
This is Trump's favorite topic, bathrooms.
I can't talk to you about it because it's so gross. But basically, water-free bathrooms, water-free, no water. This is not good, but
extremely dry from the standpoint of water. Trump is obsessed with bathrooms. He is going to be ranting and raving about bathrooms and plumbing from the grave, the way that it is going. And as you know, Donald Trump predicted that under a Biden presidency, people would be flushing toilets 10 to 15 times. Doesn't seem to be happening. Most people getting the suction they expect from their respective toilets. The reason Trump's having to flush 10 to 15 times is he's constantly dumping classified documents in there. But this guy is obsessed with plumbing, and he's also increasingly obsessed with things that aren't true. To his credit, Trump says that this forthcoming story I'm going to play for you about Kamala Harris's app for undocumented immigrants, Trump says it's not even believable. And the reason it's not believable is, of course, that what he says here isn't true.
Because they're flying them in, they're in airplanes. I will shut down all entries through Kamala's migrant phone app. She's got a phone app. And you know who it's meant for? The cartel heads. The heads. So the cartel heads call the app and they tell them where to drop the illegal migrants. This is the administration. It's not even believable.
It's not believable because it's not happening. And by the way, it's Trump's administration during which that CBP, Customs and Border Patrol app, was released in the first place. So I don't know why he's calling it Kamala Harris's app. If anything, it's Donald Trump's app. At another point during his speech in Waunakee, Wisconsin, Trump's ability to speak collapsed even further. Just random words here.
Never will. She can't do it. You know, remember their promise to, the education was going to get rid of the student loans? That didn't work out too well. And for the students out there, you didn't get it. They talked about it for 3 years. They didn't get it. And just a wasted promise. I just hope everyone knows you're not getting it because they never got it. They said they were going to get it, but I get what we want. I get 100% of what we want instead of raising.
Just random words, and the crowd increasingly confused about what Donald Trump is saying. Finally, I challenge you to tell me what this one is about.
Well, I'll tell you, I never did let it happen. And I didn't do the rage. They want to do, and they're going to do, no doubt about it, a big an increase in age and wage, because what that means is
rage and age and wage.
You're going to go way up in terms of when you qualify. So How would you like to say?
Just, it doesn't make any sense. One of the things that's happening at Trump's events, it's worse than what Kamala Harris said. During the debate, Kamala Harris sent Trump for a loop, sent him into a tizzy when she said, your rallies are boring and people leave early. It's actually getting worse. People who, I was going to say customers, people who go to Trump's events, it's not even that they're bored and they leave. They're starting to realize he's making no sense. And so they stay in a state of shock about what's going on, looking for any opportunity to clap. It's silence other than random coughing during much of these events. And if Trump stumbles upon something they like, no men in women's sports, or I'm going to bomb this person or that person if they come after me, or whatever the case may be, they immediately clap overzealously because they're desperate for something to cheer for when it's mostly just confusing drivel as his brain visibly shrinks in front of our very eyes. I have to give credit to one Fox News host. His name is Neil Cavuto. And the reason I have to give him credit is, unlike the vast majority of Fox News, he reported on the extraordinary crimes that Donald Trump was connected to when this filing by Jack Smith was released earlier this week. If you watched most of Fox News on Wednesday, you would have noticed a conspicuous absence of reporting about, wow, this new bombshell filing exposes that Trump was even more clearly disregarding the law and reality when he was pushing to steal the 2020 election. He was increasingly desperate. He was increasingly angry. It was major news. We reported on it. Most serious corporate news reported on it. Fox News mostly did not, except for Neil Cavuto. The funny part is Neil Cavuto's acting like this is the first time he's ever heard of the fact that Trump committed crime.
On a busy news day, and we're trying to get to the bottom of it. Prosecutors right now are offering a redacted version of special counsel Jack Smith's filing. That had to be made public today. It was in this newly unsealed court paper. We're learning that former President Trump resorted to crimes that have been to cling to power.
I love how he sounds surprised. Resorted to crimes.
After the 2020 election. We don't know much more than that. A lot of this stuff was going to be coming out anyway. We're going to be getting the latest on that and a legal to look at what is being revealed here and whether it's giving us any information on anything we don't know. The timing of this, of course, a little more than about 5 weeks before the general election. We're on top of that, give you the latest on this. In the meantime, then there's this.
You know, Neil, I appreciate that you're reporting on this, but tell me more about how you haven't been paying attention for the last 4 years, given that it seems to be coming as a surprise to you. The January 6th committee laid it out pretty damn well. Trump's second impeachment laid it out pretty well. The trial and subsequent conviction on 34 criminal counts laid it out pretty well. What we learned about Trump and his classified documents under the chandelier surrounding the toilet at Mar-a-Lago, those pictures laid it out pretty clearly. And Neil Cavuto is like, I don't know, I guess he committed crimes. It's not really clear how this all happened. Now, I want to mention one other thing about this report, which Judge Tanya Chutkan authorized, or this filing to be released. What we've gotten so far is the body of the document. When we hit the body with crimes, we've gotten the body of the document. The body of the document is riddled with footnotes. There's footnotes all over this thing. Those are the tiny little numbers. Those refer to the notes and appendices where a lot of the sources for these claims are contained. Trump's going to fight it. His lawyers are going to fight it. They're going to do everything they can to prevent the release of the appendices containing the source information for these criminal claims that are made. But in all likelihood, in several weeks, we are going to get the sources for everything in this finding. Will it be before the election or after? I don't know the answer to that. Trump will say, don't release it. Trump will say, if you're going to release it, redact the hell out of it. Hopefully they do release it with as few redactions as possible. But if you think Trump's flipping out now, where he can just say, oh, it says I was desperate, but there's no sourcing on these claims, the sources will likely come out over the next month. And I can only imagine it'll send him for a loop. If it's post-election and Trump has lost, meaning he suspects they might throw me in prison. Trump believes that winning is how to stay out of prison. If Trump loses, and then the sourcing, the appendices come out for this filing from Jack Smith, he's going to lose his mind, I believe, like we've never seen before. Something to look forward to in early to mid-November. Let's take a very quick break, and the Friday show will continue right after this. Don't forget that the best way to support the David Pakman Show is by becoming a member, which gives you access to the daily bonus show, the regular show with no commercials. You also get access to our entire archive of every episode dating back a really long time, and plenty of other awesome membership perks. Go to joinpakman.com, joinpakman.com. Let's talk a little bit about taxes. I have wild video of a Republican congressman on CNBC being asked, how will Republicans pay if the decision is made to extend the Trump tax cuts? Now, let me kind of give you an overview of what's going on before we get to the video. In 2017, Donald Trump's tax plan included provisions that, if you do nothing, expire in 2015. This includes reversing the top tax rate back up 2 and a fraction point, 2.6 points, something like that. It includes what happens with the SALT tax, which I'll explain, the SALT deduction rather, and a bunch of other things. If Kamala Harris were to become president, presumably some of the things Trump did would be allowed to expire. If Donald Trump becomes president, presumably he would try to extend some of those things, but maybe not, because Trump has been talking about changing the SALT deduction, even though he's the one who changed it to begin with. And at the same time, it depends on what support he has in the House and Senate and who holds a majority there. So needless to say, the November election in the House and Senate is particularly meaningful, even just in the universe of what happens with our taxes. But that gets us to this interview on CNBC with Republican Congressman Jason Smith. And he was asked, how would Republicans pay if you extend the Trump tax cuts? The Trump tax cuts reduce revenue. That needs to somehow be made up for if you want to stick to your own stated priority of balancing the budget. How do you do it? He doesn't know. Let's listen to what he has to say, and then we're going to delve into it in more detail.
In taxes. But how would you pay for extending the tax cuts and getting rid of the SALT cap?
We're going to have to look at everything. I think whenever you're looking
That's a big number, though. Is it not? What would the number be?
So first of all, how will you pay for it? We will look at everything. Okay, that's not really an answer.
If you got rid of the SALT cap and you extended the tax cuts, it's trillions of dollars, isn't it, over 10 years?
It's about $900 billion over 10 years is the SALT cap elimination. You're looking at $4.6 trillion worth of unpaid for tax expirations that we have to address. So we have to look at everything. Everything is on the table.
You think tariffs can pay for that? Are you?
I think we're going to have to look at absolutely everything. There's not one thing that can pay for $4.6 trillion.
Like what, though? Do Republicans aren't willing to raise taxes anywhere?
Well, I think there's hundreds of billions of dollars out there that the administration has tried to use for student loans. I also believe if you codify various aspects of the 301 tariffs, that can raise a lot of money in the hundreds of billions of dollars. There's multiple things to look at. I also believe there's some deductions that we should be getting rid of that are out there that are not necessary. We need a flatter, fairer rate.
Okay, so what kind of deductions do we get rid of?
Well, for one, SALT is going to be in the middle of the road. The president's called for us to address SALT. There'll be a cap.
I really need you to understand that Trump is now talking about doing something with SALT. He's the one who dealt with SALT to begin with in his tax plan. He now wants to reverse it to fix the very problem he created. So let me remind you what the deal is with this. SALT stands for state and local taxes. It used to be the case that all of the state and local taxes that you paid, you could deduct federally. And therefore, you would not pay federal tax on state and local taxes. They become a deduction. The Trump tax cuts put a cap of $10,000 on that. And the people that really suffered as a result are those living in higher tax states, typically blue states that have much better infrastructure and education and all of those things that kind of matter. Trump now is saying, well, we're going to get rid of the SALT cap, but he's acting like he's solving a problem someone else created. He's the one who put the SALT cap on to begin with. But then now you have this Republican congressman saying, well, we're going to put a cap on SALT to solve what? The problem from removing it, which you did to begin with? It doesn't make any sense.
On SALT. It's not going to be unlimited. There will be a cap on SALT because there is no way in a Republican House of Representatives that you can pass an unlimited SALT deduction.
So what kind of number do you think that'll be?
A higher cap or a lower cap than where it is now?
I would say definitely a higher cap. There's going to have to be some wiggle room. If you look at the SALT cap that was passed in 2017, it had a marriage penalty. Republicans are supposed to be the party of families.
All right. So listen, the bottom line here is they have no idea. They are the party that argues we want to trim the deficit and start paying off the debt. Trump promised in a 4-year term, his first 4-year term, we would have no more national debt. Obviously, none of us believed it, just like we didn't believe Mexico would pay to build a wall, just like we didn't believe Jared Kushner would solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We didn't believe it. But they are simultaneously saying we are going to pass tax law that increases the deficit. We care about reducing the deficit, and yet we have no idea how we're going to do it. Now, if any of these people wanted to be taken seriously, they would look at the known. It's not he talks about everything is on the table. Well, the government getting in the business of running a circus to pay down the debt. Obviously, it's not anything is on the table. You can do spending cuts. You can borrow deficit spending, which they say they're against. You can generate economic growth with your tax cuts, which although Trump said his tax cuts would generate economic growth, they actually did not. You can raise a different tax, right? You lower the income tax, you raise some other tax, or you eliminate the SALT cap, but then you got to find some new revenue, right? That's another possibility. You close loopholes, and they love saying that, but they never close the really big loopholes that allow Warren Buffett to pay a lower tax rate than his secretary. Or you privatize elements of government. You sell off assets or services and say, we're taking, this is deficit negative. We're going to take it off the books. We'll give it to some private company, run it at a profit, and we can sort of on paper eliminate the deficit associated with it, even though it will have huge social costs. Those are the ways that you can cover a shortfall. Republicans are morally opposed to some of them. Tax spending cuts they want to do, but of course they want to do it in a crazy way. They want to close the Department of Education. We don't need the Department of Energy. We don't, depending on who you ask, trim the IRS 95%. So the real answer here is our plan is the same as it has always been. We're going to give tax cuts to the rich and to corporations. We are going to cry about the deficit and big spending Democrats while we blow up the deficit and then blame either the person who came before us or the person who came after us. That's actually the plan. And I would appreciate it if he just told us that that was the plan instead of acting like they actually care about even having a plan. They don't. CNN guest Keith Boykin did something amazing on CNN earlier this week. He, number one, shot down Congressman Byron Donalds for lying that crime is up. Crime is down. Remember, crime is down. And then he even went after the host on the show, Abby Phillip, for allowing him to lie. Now, to Abby Phillip's credit, in this clip, she does attempt to insert some facts about crime. But what I like in general is that Boykin is saying it's the responsibility of the hosts to establish basic facts. We can't have a debate over is crime up or down when it's knowable. The debate needs to be about other things. We have to agree about the facts. So take a look at this video, really nicely done.
How is that not violent rhetoric?
We have to acknowledge the reality going on in every city in America.
Not answering the question. Crime is not answering the question.
That is answering the question. Because the reality in America, hold on, Keith, the reality in America is that crime is massively up.
Crime is not massively up. That's a lie.
You can bang the table all you want, but that's
lying,
not true.
Congressman. You're lying.
We already know that there are cities.
The FBI just released data this week that crime is going down.
We already know that.
Oh my God! Abby, why do you let this man lie on your national television like
I'm
this?
telling you the exact
This is not right.
You may not.
You're a liar,
you may not.
Congressman.
No, I'm
you're
not.
Lying.
Because you're lying to the American people now. And so I want to be respectful of what you're trying to say.
Hang on a second.
Go ahead.
If you would just let me talk, I will explain exactly what you want me to explain. We have the data. The FBI literally put out data today showing that crime is down this year for the first 6 months of the year. But look at the trend line. Okay.
Okay, listen. Crime is down. They need you to believe crime is up, because if you understand that crime is down, you realize everything they've been saying about Biden-Harris is false. So first, let me give you the data. Violent crime is down. The murder rate is down. Property crime is down. All types of crime are down. And they have been trending down before Joe Biden was president, before Donald Trump was president, before Barack Obama was president. Crime continues to decline. Now, you will hear the normal talking points. Well, it only appears that crime is down because it's up so much that people don't even bother reporting crime anymore. We know that that's not true because there are independent crime victimization surveys which aren't related to the reporting of crime, and they move in parallel. So you would have to believe that people are not only not reporting crimes, but also lying on surveys when they have been victims of a crime and saying, no, I haven't. Why would they do that? Why would the data move in parallel if it weren't true. So that's number one. Secondly, they will say, oh, police departments no longer report crime to the FBI, so the FBI doesn't know what's going on. It has always been the case that some police departments don't report crime to the FBI. The number or the share hasn't gone up, so that's not a good explanation. They will sometimes tell you anecdotal stories. Trump at his rallies tells these lurid stories about an individual who was tragically stabbed or whatever. Those stories, when they are true, are no less tragic because crime in general is going down, but crime in general is going down. This gets us to why it's critical for them to convince you that crime is going up. Donald Trump predicted, among other things, that if Biden were president, it would be a lawless country where police has been defunded, crime is just running rampant, there's no prosecution, there's no consequences, there's no arrests, the stock market will reach 1929 levels, you'll have no heating and cooling. You remember, you have to flush your toilet 10 to 15 times. Trump reportedly does have to flush his toilet 10 to 15 times, but that's because he's flushing so many classified documents down it. That's a different story. If you acknowledge that crime is continuing to decline, it directly undercuts the believability of Trump's apocalyptic nightmare scenario of a rapture-like dystopia, an inferno under Biden. And it gets you to think, hey, you know what? If crime is down, stock market is at record highs, inflation is down, wage growth is up. And you might say, why would I go back to Trump? It doesn't make any sense. Not only are things okay, Trump lied in his predictions. They were obviously, he got his predictions wrong and or he lied knowing these things weren't going to happen. So that's why people like Byron Donalds continue to insist crime is up when it is down. CNN and others, I don't want to pick on CNN. You know, Keith Boykin goes, Abby, you got to get him to stop lying. All media hosts should moderate debates about ideas, but when a Republican says Trump really won in 2020, as Trump did during the debate, that should be fact-checked. It's not biased to fact-check facts. And when these Republicans say crime is down, hosts should jump in and say it is not down. It is not down. So very nicely done by Keith Boykin there and getting the facts, hopefully, to people who need to hear it. Follow us on social media, interact with the David Pakman Show community, see exclusive content, see when we're taking calls live, and stay up to date on other big show announcements. We post daily. Find us on Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, and TikTok. All right, let's get to Friday feedback. On Friday this week, the way it's actually supposed to be, you can email info@davidpakman.com to comment on the show. Anything goes, something you want me to talk about, disagree with me about, agree with, whatever. Every once in a while, we get some kind of horrible trolling type message or an attack message. You have to see this one. This is like a wall of text from Albert. And here's what Albert says. I hate that I have to actually email you to be able to call you on your BS. Just trust me. I would love to done this on YouTube channel, but unlike you, my job ain't to smear other people into the ground. I just have one question. How much do you pay for your subscribers? Because you won't let nobody debate them on what CNN and NBC tell him. So why not let the Republicans, the conservatives, or us Americans actually exercise our freedom of speech? Or are you going to start saying that needs to be censored? Because so far I've heard you say Trump wants to get rid of the school system. No, he wants to take it out of the federal government's hands. He did the same thing with abortion to get it out of the federal government's hands and put it where it belongs with the people. So how is this wrong? I mean, I can't even make it clear sentence without word vomit. And then when did she do a debate against him? It was a 3-on-1, which actually wasn't fair to be like me, a Republican and a conservative, all ganging up on you. That was all one sentence. So just like I told you in your videos, it's time to put your money where your mouth is. You got 4 years prepared to run for president, my man. And if you don't judge. And the saddest part at all is you're probably never going to ever read this because of one of your flunkies is just going to delete it because you don't want to know that there's an opposition out there, whether it's American, Republican, or conservative, because the only two y'all represent are the liberals and the Democrats. And before you say anything, as if I was about to say anything, before you say anything, I plan on running for office in 4 years, but not to destroy like you want to build back better like it should be. So first and foremost, I'm not going to run for president because I legally cannot be president. I'm from Argentina originally, legal citizen coming in the front door. And I cannot be president based on current law. Secondly, I don't pay for subscribers. The subscribers, some of them pay me if they like the show. Sort of seems a little bit confused. And I think my favorite part is that Albert seems to recognize he can't even put these thoughts coherently on text, and it ends up being word vomit. He says, I can't even make it clear sentence without word vomit, unless he's talking about someone else. In any case, I'm glad that he's recognizing that this is completely and totally incoherent. Okay, Steve Rowe says, never take financial advice from a broke guy. Dave has no financial education at all. Trump is a billionaire. You decide who's blowing smoke up your ass. Trump's tariffs are so bad, Biden kept them in place. Let that sink in. Well, that's not true. But, you know, I think there is something here to talk about. Never take financial advice from a broke guy. I have no financial education. Well, I do have an MBA in financial planning. Other than that, I have absolutely no education in this stuff whatsoever. And listen, Trump has more money than me. That's true. That's absolutely true. But I'm not broke. And the difference is the money my parents gave me sitting in the S&P 500 would not actually give me what it is Trump was given. Trump's money, as we learned that last week, was squandered through his business activities. If Trump had simply put the money he was given by his parents into an index fund, he would have even more money than he has right now. In other words, Trump has damaged his financial standing through his businesses. Whereas I mean, listen, it's not about patting myself on the back. I built this business from zero with no loans, gifts, or whatever of $1 million, as Trump says, or any amount. So listen, you take advice from whoever you want to. You decide also whether what a billionaire does with their money is what's most relevant to you. Okay, we did a poll on the David Pakman Show website. The question was, do you believe Trump when he says he won't run in 2028 if he loses? Over 110,000 of you voted. 39% of you believe Trump won't run again if he loses in November, whereas 61% of you, a majority, believe Trump will run again if he loses. On this one, I disagree with the majority of my audience. I believe Donald Trump will not run again if he loses. And in fact, we're going to talk about this in different scenarios. I believe if Trump loses in November, within 24 hours, you will see Republicans start to distance from Trump, and it will be effectively the end of MAGA as we know it. Many comments came in about Mark Robinson, the North Carolina gubernatorial candidate's disgusting comments about, I'd like slavery to come back and I would like to own some slaves and all these other things. Space Force Commander asks, does Robinson know that if slavery comes back, he's not going to be the one owning them? Well, I don't know what a number of you stumbled across this question. I don't know what Robinson knows or believes about what it would be like if slavery came back. Monk says it's insane that people see Trump as strong when he's so mentally fragile and insecure. Yeah, you know, bullies, in many senses, want to be seen as strong, but they're really representing their insecurities. When Trump mimics or makes fun of how other people look, Trump's certainly insecure about how he looks. I mean, he's obese and he looks terrible. He wouldn't paint his face orange and do 4 hair transplants and all of it if he was happy with the way he looked. When Trump talks about how other people are mentally whatever, that he's now talking about Kamala Harris, etc. On some level, Trump is probably concerned about the fact that he's constantly losing his train of thought and doesn't know what's going on at a bunch of these rallies. And it's a very common thing that those who bully others are themselves fragile and insecure. And Trump seems very much to fit that description to a T. Also getting a lot of messages about Trump constitutionally, sort of like from a personality standpoint. Asparagus 114 wrote in and said, we shouldn't have someone who gets triggered this easily in charge of a nuclear arsenal. That is very well said. One of the revelations of the debate against Kamala Harris was not really that Trump doesn't know anything about policy. We knew that. We've known that for a very long time, right? When years ago he calls Michael Flynn in the middle of the night and says, Michael, is a strong dollar or a weak dollar good for me and good for the United States, right? We've known for a long time he doesn't know anything about policy. But what was remarkable and scary about the debate against Kamala Harris is that with a couple of planned lines, she had a plan at some point mentioned that the rally attendees are bored with Trump and they leave the rally early. She knew it would trigger him, and it did. He took the bait. He can't control it. And if he is this triggered by Kamala Harris saying people are bored with your rallies, he cannot, in any kind of respectable or trustworthy way, participate in the decisions that presidents need to participate in. It's a major, major risk. All right, we did another poll on the YouTube channel. Which is more important? Who's ahead in the national polls or who's ahead in the swing state polls? 108,000 of you voted. 94% of you say that the leader of the swing state polls is really what matters. And I agree with you to a degree. The caveat would be, if the national popular vote lead gets so big, it becomes almost a statistical impossibility to lose the Electoral College. That being said, it's got to be pretty big, and Kamala Harris certainly isn't there right now. From Reddit, Solarian says, worst case scenario, Trump wins the presidency. What do we do? He's already said he wants to jail those critical of him. Right now, this mostly extends to news organizations and late night show hosts like Jimmy Kimmel, but I'm sure David will be on the list. He's also going to persecute LGBTQ plus folks like myself. He's going to deport tons of people as well. If he wins in November, is it time to pack up and go to another country? I understand we need to vote, and I'm going to do my part, but I feel we need a contingency plan, perhaps move to Norway or Australia. Well, what you have to remember is that moving to Norway or Australia is pretty difficult. You can't just up and move there. And so, as I've said before, it's both unrealistic for most people on a financial and personal level. Your family, your lives are in the United States. And from an immigration standpoint, it would be very difficult to move. What I've been saying to people is, if it gets to the point where Trump wins and what's happening in your state is disgusting and you have to get out, consider a blue state. You don't have to go through any kind of immigration process. And yes, the blue states on average are a little more expensive because the quality of life is much higher. Consider that. And I think on the one hand, we want to stay and try to turn these red states blue. As a collective, we want to stay and turn the red states blue. As an individual, the caller I got months ago who said, David, I live in Georgia. My kid is trans. What's happening at school is horrible. What do I do? I'm going to vote, but I don't know. Well, maybe you go to Connecticut. Maybe you go to Massachusetts. Maybe you go to Rhode Island or Vermont or California. You go somewhere where they aren't dealing with this insanity that Georgia is dealing with. And I can't fault people for making those decisions for themselves. That's for sure. Easier, not easy for everybody, but easier than moving to Australia, for example. Also from the subreddit, Exact Truck says, I really wish George W. Bush would publicly endorse Kamala. He really fucked up. He's responsible for millions of casualties and chaos continuing to this day. America has not held him accountable in the least. His moves were ill-considered and ill-advised, and I feel like he has regrets trying to act like a grown-up in a job he was fully unqualified for. Partisan politics are eating us alive. A step towards the other side would show some integrity, bring some redemption, and be seen by history with admiration. You already know the family hates Trump. If Cheney can do it, so can he, or am I just delusional? So let me give you my personal take first. I would like to see George W. Bush endorse Kamala Harris. On a personal level, for all of the horrible things that Bush has done, I would like to see him step in and say, let's make the right choice. I also am aware that a lot of leftists or self-proclaimed leftists, if George W. Bush endorses Kamala, they would go, I told you so. Kamala's right wing. Cheney endorsed her. Bush endorsed her. Blah, 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 right? On and on and on. And of course, it's not the case in the sense that Bush and Cheney disagree with Kamala Harris on almost all policy. It's that if Bush did it and Cheney has done it, they see the reinforcement of the guardrails of our democracy as more important than what should the top tax rate be, which they can get back to fighting us about in 2029 if they get a winner in 2028. So I would like to see Bush do it, but don't think for a second that they won't go after him brutally and say Bush's endorsement is proof that Kamala's a right-winger, even though it's not true. We've got a great bonus show for you today. Sign up at joinpakman.com. Pre-order my forthcoming book, The Echo Machine, at davidpakman.com/echo.